This is Unbridled Expression, and I'm your host, Kymberlee della Luce. Every Wednesday, we talk about art, culture, creativity, and whatever else we're curious about. Thanks for listening. And if you like it, please do subscribe and share. Hey everyone, it's Kymberlee. How you doing? I have a great show for you today. I can't wait to share. The first thing I'm going to share is this poem that I wrote a couple years ago, and it's going to be a little bit of a framework for everything else we're going to talk about. So here we go. Sit tight. The poem is called Purple Is. Purple is the in-between, between twilight and the deep dark. In between left and right. Right is not straight, despite its etymology. And purple isn't just red and blue. It's also the absence of yellow. Purple is the perfectly ripe plum and the darkest bruise that takes a month to fade from the skin. In England, the purple emperor butterfly was once captured with rotting flesh. Purple can be the color of mourning and the color of the irises that I once planted in my mother's garden. Are butterflies meant to be captured? This is being recorded on the day after the winter solstice, a beautiful time that is the birthing of the light, and it is the most sacred holiday for me, the holiday of being connected to the earth and allowing myself to feel that energy, that solar energy, as the sun is birthed, through the legs of the mother, coming out of the cosmos. I love the winter solstice. I love how dark it gets, and then I love the burgeoning light each day. It's just amazing. So last week I drew a card from the Brian Eno Oblique Strategies deck. And the card I drew was cluster analysis. So I just sort of riffed, not actually knowing what the definition of cluster analysis was. There's a lot more to say about that, and I am likely going to be writing about it in a blog post, so you can look for that. But I thought I would just quickly read the blurb in Wiki about it. It says cluster analysis, or clustering, is the task of grouping a set of objects in such a way that objects in the same group, called a cluster, are more similar in some sense to each other than to those in other groups, clusters. It goes on to say, cluster analysis itself is not one specific algorithm, but the general task to be solved. So it's kind of where we're at in culture right now. There's a lot of polarity happening, at least in the United States, right? I'm just going to specifically talk about my culture, where I live. I know that there's a lot of this happening in other parts of the world, but we're going to keep it here for the sake of a creative constraint. There's just a lot of, polarity, a lot of disagreement. I find myself getting caught up in that, in my own head, in my life. And I've been sort of, trying to find a balance, right? To create some magic out of it, to understand what I'm here for, to be giving my offerings to the world in a way that makes sense to you, hopefully, and to me. Certainly doing this podcast is helping me understand myself better. One of the great things about self-expression is that it gives you a sense of, self-awareness. It's reflective practice is the bomb, right? When we allow ourselves to go back over what we've said or what we've written and, look for the patterns, it's really helpful to, better understand ourselves. And I think on some level, maybe that's what cluster analysis is. I'm going to keep going back over the topic of cluster analysis because it's fascinating to me. It was actually originated in anthropology in 1932 and has been used in lots of contexts. So yeah, but for me, in my own context, I'm noticing with creating this podcast, I am sort of, like learning. I have to put tags on everything, and I have to, I don't have to, but I'm choosing to create transcripts and, organize the material. And as a very free-spirited, free-flowing kind of person, chopping things up into categories and sort of putting them in boxes is really not my strength. And in fact, I would say it sort of goes against my natural way of being. I often feel like I'm just a river, just kind of cutting through and flowing, picking up debris, and just kind of riding, cutting through the land. I don't know, there's an image that comes up for me of, not exactly a spiral, but if you've ever flown over the land, when you look down, you can see the way that, humans have cut everything up into boxes for farming and land management, but the rivers, right? The really big rivers here in the United States will just cut through everything, and the humans have to sort of, move around those rivers, and sometimes the rivers disrupt the the neatly compartmentalized bits that humanity tries to lay down. And that's often sort of a metaphor for me that in order to thrive in this world, in order to make sense of things and to help other people make sense of things, sometimes we have to have categories. But for me, I always go back to, a circle or a bowl or or a river, something that I guess sort of vessel-like or water. I don't know. When I was categorizing my videos on YouTube so that I could have videos of my podcast, I noticed this video from years ago that is about my my artistic practice, and it was some kind of participatory, large online class that I took, and we were supposed to do these tasks. And at the very end, I basically said something like, "Yeah, boxes just don't make sense to me, so I had to put my stuff in a bowl." It's just really funny how that works out. I'll link to that video, and you can see what I'm talking about. So being really, I guess you might say, really feminine, really, carrying a lot of feminine energy like I do, and carrying a lot of that kind of being connected to everything, the way that I often feel, it has come to not surprise me when little synchronous events happen, like in episode 2, which would have been 2 weeks ago. I referenced bell hooks and shared a link to her book. And about a week later, I think, she ended up passing away, sadly. But I've noticed that I'm often vibing with things and I don't even know why. It just sort of I'll pick a book up off my shelf, or I'll run across something that pulls everything together, or that brings me exactly the information I needed in that moment. And more I'm beginning to trust that. Also, many years ago, when my mother passed away, may she rest in peace, and may bell hooks rest in peace. When that happened, she was living in Arizona, trying to get up here to Seattle to see my daughter's graduation, and trying to figure out where she was going to stay and stuff like that. And the entire time she was talking, or, we were making these plans, it was really strange, because here I am talking to her. We talked a lot, and I just couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't going to end up coming. And I didn't know why. She had bought a ticket and everything. She was, really set on coming for the graduation, but I couldn't see her here. I couldn't feel her essence in that moment. And then, about a week, 2 weeks, something like that, before my daughter's graduation, unfortunately, she passed away. And again, these kinds of moments, they happen a lot in my life. They always have. And the more I pay attention, the more I start to see these patterns. And maybe that's my own kind of cluster analysis. I don't know. It's interesting, though. And as I put this work out into the world, I think about how I can be part of a movement that means something to me, a movement that's necessary, the sort of the feminist movement, how I can be part of that, how I can continue the work of bell hooks. People like bell hooks. People like Prince. When Prince died, I remember, I mean, he was huge. Like, he was my absolute inspiration, absolutely in my lineage, my artistic lineage, even like I would say my philosophical or spiritual lineage. So the night before Prince died, I was laying in bed with my lover at the time, and I was young. He was younger than me, so Prince wasn't really part of his like growing up years, right? And I was like, hey, can we put like a Prince playlist on or something? Because I love his music. And he's like, yeah, let's do that. So we put this Prince playlist on, we enjoyed it. And then the next day, Prince died. And it was such a strange coincidence because I hadn't listened to Prince in a while. And I just sort of randomly, I'm putting that in quotes, air quotes as I sit here, I just sort of randomly had him play this music. And then Prince died. And as I was saying, when he did, I remember thinking at the time that, it's a huge loss for humanity. And at the same time, it's like my job to carry his ideas forward, his love of liberation, his love of, he had a real sense of unity, but he was also absolutely doing the work of deconstructing, right? Deconstructing the oppression, the oppressive system that we're in, and was really outspoken about it and also really loving, which is how I feel. That's also true of bell hooks. And also true of my mother, bless her. Yeah, lots of outspokenness going around. And yet, I consistently want to stay in my heart space. I feel like that is the most important thing as we sort of surf the waves of the chaos that we're going through. Like in cluster analysis, where there's a grouping of a set of objects, categories, where you're sort of looking at what the objects have in common. I'm tasking myself right now to not always focus on the differences. Because when we focus on the differences of each other instead of what we have in common, and we're always, polarizing or, choosing sides all the time, we end up with a lot of brokenness. We end up being honestly manipulated by people who have more power and privilege. And that's exactly the way the system has worked for a very long time. Unions get busted up that way, right? When you divide, you can conquer. And I don't want to see humanity go down that road. I want to see humanity get together and enjoy life and plant a garden together and, just be in that more like, dancing, beautiful space. I would start singing a Prince song here, but YouTube does not allow that. And this is going to end up on YouTube. It's kind of a bummer, actually, isn't it? Anyway, yeah. So what I'll do instead is I will link to a dance party video or song that I made during quarantine just for fun. So we can dance to that when the time comes. But that's kind of what I was getting at with this idea of like purple, right? That it's not one thing or the other. It's this blend, right? I remember years ago when there were some really contentious elections here, not 2016. I think it was like, I don't even remember. I think it was when Obama won. And, there's all this celebrating from Democrats. And I remember looking at the map on the news channel and the blue and the red. And I thought, those are almost equal. Like the Republican Democratic split is, it's been in the country. I'm not talking about in the Senate. I'm talking about just even in, like where our people connect or don't, right? And I wonder often about ideologically where we connect and where instead of where we don't. I'm a very liberal and progressive person in a lot of ways, and I also have seen some just really shitty behavior, frankly, on the part of other liberal and progressive people who don't seem to tune in to a person's humanity, or a group of people. And I'm not saying I'm immune to that, my mind doesn't go there. I'm not saying that it isn't easy, to veer over to like, oh, those people, but it's not actually, I consider myself a card-carrying feminist, and that, feminism isn't about harm, it's about care. It's not about polarity. It's about being, being together and creating together. And at least that's my brand of feminism. Also bell hooks. So I'm going to read to you a couple of passages from bell hooks in her honor, and also because they're very in alignment with what we're talking about here today. The first one is actually both the quotes are from Teaching to Transgress, Education as the Practice of Freedom. This is a book that I got when I got my master's in education, and it is phenomenal. I recommend it. And on what page is this? On page 83. In it, she's talking about how she's concerned that identity politics don't really help, right? They can end up continuing, like perpetuating marginalization. And she's quoting someone named Fuss. She says, Fuss makes the point that the artificial boundary between insider and outsider necessarily contains rather than disseminates knowledge. So using our river metaphor, information can be like the river. It can flow. It can kind of push us out of the ways that we try to contain and sort of categorize and box everyone in. Categories are great with data. Categories are great when you need to help. I'm realizing as I build out my website and build out my work and try to create something that is referenced so people can find it if that's what they're looking for. I hope that's you. Little plug. But what I'm finding as I do that is that it's very useful when I'm trying to find something. It's useful to think about, oh wow, this is a gift. If I put a little label, a little tag on this, put a category on this, people can find it. That's so great. What's not great is when we do that in a negative way towards people, when we clump a bunch of people together and say, make a determination about them based on that. Oh, they are a this and therefore they must do this. It's not helpful. It's dehumanizing, and I think I have used the word dehumanizing so far on all of the podcasts. This is a theme because it's a problem when we do that to one another. And I want to try to be a helper. Now I'm going to read from page 75 of the same book. This chapter is called Theory as Liberatory Practice. Liberatory practice is what this is all about. We need it. We're here for it. We get to do this. It can be fun, and it's a lot of work. And there's sorrow. There's sorrow, my friends. And it's so important that we remember that and that we don't try to shove it down. Yeah, so she says, I am grateful that I can be a witness, testifying that we can create a feminist theory, a feminist practice, a revolutionary feminist movement that can speak directly to the pain that is within folks and offer them healing words, healing strategies, healing theory. There is no one among us who has not felt the pain of sexism and sexist oppression, the anguish that male domination has created in daily life, the profound and unrelenting misery and sorrow. I wish that the misery and sorrow wasn't there. I wish it was all joy all the time. That's what I always wish for everyone. I do. But it is there, and we have to face it, right? Being shielded from it is not helpful. I was telling my kids the other day that I feel like the time we're in, where we're starting to look around and see how dysfunctional the systems are, and we're starting to see how oppressive they are. We're starting to see how much we've been harmed by our government, by the lies we've been told from various places, institutions, government, etc., etc. It reminds me of finding out that there's no Santa Claus. I remember being so angry and hurt at my parents that they had been lying to me for such a long time, that, oh, there's no tooth fairy, there's no Santa Claus. What? Why did you tell me there was when there wasn't? And I didn't actually do that with my kids. It was all very tongue in cheek for that reason, because I didn't want to lie to my kids. I didn't want to lie to my kids because I love them. And to me, love means truth. It means connection, not manipulation. Everyone manipulates at various times in their lives until they learn not to. Hopefully they do learn not to. So one of my favorite holiday movies is Elf. I love it. And it also is predicated on this whole idea that, oh my gosh, can you believe it? Can you believe all these people don't believe in Santa Claus? Well, what do you think, the parents do? Yeah, the parents do it. Often the moms do it. You know what I'm saying? Yes, it is the parents who are making it happen. And it is not a man in a red suit, blah, blah, blah. The history of all of that is so, I'm not even going to go into it, but there is no Santa Claus. And the spirit of Christmas isn't about consuming. So we'll keep talking about consumerism and capitalism and about the system that needs to change. And we'll keep thinking about how we can love one another along the way, right? That's what matters to me. What matters to me is that we stay in that heart space as we deconstruct, because deconstruction is not the same thing as destruction. Destruction is what we're trying to stop doing. Deconstructing something that is engaging in destruction is what is needed. So I'm not really sure why people cling to old systems that aren't working. We know there are people that are manipulating this system that are just hugely benefiting from it. But the everyday person seems to cling to it because they maybe don't know that there's another way. That's my guess. It's we frequently fear change. We fear what's going to happen if we embrace a new way. And this is a common thing in humanity. But as we connect with one another and we work towards unity, we work towards collective effort. And I'm not talking about communism, okay? That's not what we're not here for talking about communism. I think, honestly, I'm more of a conscious capitalist, if I'm honest. I think capitalism has a lot of great stuff. But again, I don't really care about the labels. So we're going to just not think about that, about labels. Let's just talk about choices, right? This is the last thing we're going to talk about today. So my family plays a game called Settlers of Catan. It's fun. I love it. It's, like a game. If you don't know it, I'll briefly tell you that it's a game of dividing resources. Each person has a certain amount of resources and that's assigned. And then you go through the game acquiring resources, trading, that sort of thing. Now, Settlers of Catan can be played more than one way. You can play it as what I would call, I'm going to label, you could play it as an avaricious bastard, right? You can be all for you and just collecting as much as you can. You can also play the game in a very cooperative way. Now, ultimately, there will be a winner because it's a game, right? I like games where the point is to everyone create something together so that everyone wins. So when you're looking at it in a playful way, you can say, oh, let's see how we can do this. And in our family, we tend to play pretty cooperatively. Oh, sure. What do you need? Let me see if I have it. But one time we were playing with another family. The man of the family, the sort of the father of the family, wasn't actually playing the game, but was just sort of pacing around watching us play it. I'm not sure why. And I just openly gave away a bunch of my resources. And he looked at me with this really shrewd look on his face, and he was like, why are you doing that? What's in it for you? And he had this attitude of I was somehow trying to manipulate something for my own advantage. I have no idea what that would be, but it isn't that this guy was, some kind of, jerk or something. It just showed me that like people have different ideas about stuff like this that, I don't know. I was born in the 60s. I'm such a hippie. I really am. And I've come to realize not everyone's like that. And you have to be really careful. If you think like me and you're around a lot of people who don't think that way, you can easily get taken advantage of. So remember that, kids. So I'm telling you this to illustrate the idea that we have choices. It doesn't have to be either this or that. It's either red or it's blue. It's either, you're a jerk or you're awesome. You're a demon or you're an angel. Whatever whatever those polarities are. Oh my gosh, I just realized, one of Prince's huge songs was Purple Rain, right? Wow. Yeah, his whole thing was purple. Yeah, and I just vibe with that. My kids used to go to this little cooperative school, and they always used to sing a song. At the end of the day, they would all hold hands, and then they would sing this song. And I'm going to end this session by singing one verse of it. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. There you go. May the spirit of love surround you wherever you may go. And may this solstice, this solstice energy bring you love and light. May it bring you many blessings. May it bring you joy. May you find your way to letting go of the things that have been hurting and the past stuff that's been, may we all, because I know I still have some of that inside of me. So you may you find your way to releasing suffering and pain and finding, sharing and caring and joy in your life. Thank you for being here and listening. Until next time.